In this review video, we're going to focus on water. And this is chapter 2, and primarily we'll start with section 2. So water is essential to life. Water is life. We've seen posters around campus related to that, and we can look at water in lots of different ways. One is that it makes up most of us. And in fact, it's probably not totally an overstatement to say it's one of the most critical molecules for life on Earth. And the reason why is that we can look at it sort of from the chemical standpoint and sort of from the mechanistic standpoint. So basically, it's a polar molecule. It can form hydrogen bonds with lots of things, so that's really important. It's going to, as you remember, it provides a means to break larger molecules into smaller ones through that process we know of. It's called hydrolysis. And it's a universal solvent, meaning it has this ability to dissolve a large variety of materials in it, which is valuable to us. We can see its structure. We know that it has an oxygen with two hydrogens attached, that it is a molecule that looks, has this type of shape. It's sort of a bent. The oxygen, which has a strong electronegativity, is going to pull hydrogen's electron closer to it, effectively causing the hydrogen side of this molecule, if we just look at the whole molecule, we'll say the hydrogen side has more of a positive charge to it. In other words, the electron is kind of hanging out closer to oxygen, and therefore oxygen is going to have more of a negative charge. Remember that on the inside of both of these are the protons, and they already are positively charged. So that imbalance of where electrons want to be is what gives it water this polar nature. The fact that it's polar then is going to be really important as we go forward to say what else is it able to do. So water has an ability to form hydrogen bonds with other water molecules. And as such, we can find water in three different states on our planet. So we know liquid water. I think that's what comes to mind first. And in that case, we have hydrogen bonds between water molecules that are constantly being made and then broken and then made and then broken, which is why water has this ability to flow. We know that water can exist as a gas, in which case it has been given so much kinetic energy it's able to move away from other water molecules. And we know that water, when the temperature is lowered, becomes solidified. And not only that, but the difference on water that's interesting is that when it becomes solidified, it forms a crystalline structure, and that crystalline structure actually causes the water to expand and therefore to become less dense. So frozen water will float, right, like ice cubes float in a liquid. That property of water, especially that idea that it becomes less dense when it's frozen, that is going to enable a lot of living things to survive on Earth, because that actually serves as an insulator to organisms that might live below. It gives, it kind of provides a place for certain organisms to live actually on the ice. Another property of water is the heat capacity of it. So water is able to absorb a certain amount of heat in order that it will go up a degree Celsius. So this is what heat capacity's definition is. It's the amount of heat that's necessary for water to go up by a single degree. And it's significant with water. Water takes quite a bit of, it absorbs a lot of heat before the temperature goes up, even 1 degree Celsius. So therefore, this ability of it to hold a lot of this heat energy without really changing its overall temperature too greatly gives water this ability to take a long time to heat up, a long time to cool down, and can modulate temperatures in areas where there is a lot of water. So that's an important feature of water. Another property of water, I'm going to move this over just a little bit because I think I kind of, there we go, is this heat of vaporization. So in this case, now we're talking again about the amount of energy that water can absorb, but we're looking at it in terms of its ability to change from a liquid to a gaseous state. So because water molecules individually they keep breaking and reforming these hydrogen bonds. One minute they're broken, the next minute they form another one. That's why water's constantly absorbing a lot of heat. So it takes quite a bit of heat to get water to go from a liquid to a gas phase. So for those individual water molecules to escape their neighbors and to go into a vapor or a gas. So that's the heat of vaporization. And what you're seeing on this little graph here is similar to what we saw in class before. So we know that water is absorbing heat energy at all these different stages. But notice what happens here. This long, flattened out part of this graph is the point at which the water is still staying as a liquid, without going into that gas phase. So it's right in here where it achieves that change from a liquid state into a gas. And that's how much energy is necessary for that to occur. Water is an amazing solvent. It's able to surround, as you're seeing here, lots of different ions. In this case, we have sodium and chloride ions here, but it can surround other materials too. And in doing so, it becomes this thing we call a solvent. And the things that kind of disappear within it are the solute. So these are the things which disappear within the water. This is just a bigger picture. So if we throw salt in water, salt is an ionic compound. As soon as you throw it in there, it's going to dissociate. So sodium breaks off from chloride. We get sodium ions with positive charge, chloride ions with negative charge. And then the parts of water which have a positive charge here are going to be attracted to the negative charged chlorine. And on the flip side here, sodium, which has a positive charge, it's going to have the part of water that is a negative charge attracted to it. So that, and what occurs here is if we throw sodium chloride, if we throw salt in water, these two things happen. Sodium and chloride ions split apart, but then the water molecules surround these sodium and chloride ions, forming these hydration spheres, which effectively in our view means that these little things disappear within the water. They are dissolved within water. And when we put too much of them in, if we just keep trying to dump in more sodium chloride or more salt into it, eventually water's ability to surround that extra sodium chloride, those extra ions that are in there, dissipates. And so you see some of the salt just kind of landing at the bottom of the container because there's not enough of water, in a sense, to surround them. So what you do, that's called a saturated or a supersaturated solution. Water can stick to water. We've talked about that. Here's water sticking to other water molecules, and as such we see the effect of that right here in this water drop. So that when it's the air which is around at the air interface is not attractive to water as other water molecules, so they stick tightly together through that hydrogen bonding. Water also at the surface will have connections between water molecules, and that forms something called surface tension, which is another way to look at cohesion. So water sticking to water is this cohesive effect that can happen. Water can actually, because it has this strong attraction to other water molecules, will stick to other water molecules. So in that cohesive force, but it will also be attracted to other things, and in this case, this thing called a capillary tube, where water is also attracted to the sides of this glass tube. And so the combination of those things, water sticking to other water molecules and water kind of sticking to this tube, allows water this upward movement, which we call capillary action. Here's another example of the cohesive property of water, where we see this water strider is able to move across the surface because its legs are placed such that it doesn't pierce through that skin of water. So that's called surface tension. And last, at least last, what we'll talk about here is water's amazing ability in organisms to modulate our levels of acids and bases, and as a part of that whole equation when we start talking about pH and buffers. So when we look at water and when water has certain things dissolved in it, so here's water right here, H2O, in its liquid form. If that water itself is broken down, what we see is a hydrogen ion, and we see a hydroxide ion. So when water is left just in its pure form, usually mostly what we see is H2O. So these two are together. But when there's a lot of hydrogen ions in some solution, then we say that produces something that's acidic. It means it's a solution that has a high hydrogen ion concentration. And then if something has high hydroxide ion concentrations, we say that those solutions are basic. So this picture right here is a good one because it shows you some of the different things that we can call acid and bases, from going up to this high level of where bleach is, which means it's highly basic. It's also, we could say it's alkaline, because this part of the scale is considered increased alkalinity, while if we go down from 7 on down, this is increased in acidity. So this is a logarithmic scale. It means that every number is representing a 10-fold increase or in the concentration of either hydrogen ions or hydroxide ions. So water, in its role, it has a big role in acting to help to modify our blood pH. And it does so because we have this bicarbonate ion, or sorry, it's an ionic compound that is found in our bloodstream. And so it's dissolved in water, and it can be used to buffer conditions when our blood becomes either too acidic or too basic. Notice the arrows are going both ways, in order to produce a more neutral or desirable pH in our bloodstream. And I think that kind of covers it. I'll talk about any more of this in class if you have questions.